Hey, I'm Brett Harvey, and I'm the debate coach here at Mississippi State University. If you saw this video and clicked on it, that probably means you're at least a little bit interested in learning more about IPDA, or International Public Debate Association style debating. Maybe your college or university has a team and you're thinking of joining. Maybe you're a high school debater looking at your options for college competition. Maybe you're thinking of starting a team at your school. Wherever your interest comes from, the purpose of this video is to give you a basic overview of what IPDA debate is, how it works, and a basic rundown of the skills that you'll need to be successful. This is going to be the first video in a series we're doing on our channel to introduce people to IPDA, which is the form of debate we compete in here at Mississippi State. And in later videos, we'll talk about specific skill sets and tips for competition. But for right now, we just want to get everyone on the same page with the basics of IPDA debate. One of the defining principles of IPDA is that it's supposed to be accessible to everyone. The IPDA Constitution says right on the first page that a core purpose of the association is to focus on values like real-world debate skills, as well as inclusivity. So in that spirit, in this video, we're going to give plain language explanations of how competitive debate works in general and how IPDA debate works in particular. And when we have to use the occasional technical terms, we'll make sure to clearly explain what those terms mean. So let's get started with the most basic question. What is the International Public Debate Association, or IPDA? To answer that, we have to do a super quick history lesson. Competitive college and high school debating has been around for over a century in the United States. And in the old days, debates would often consist of school A traveling to school B and staging a debate between the schools, sort of like a football game or a basketball game. Judges would declare a winner, but it was really more of a collegial and intellectual exercise than a cutthroat competition. In the 1960s and 70s, these individual one-off debates had evolved into debate tournaments where anywhere between a half dozen to potentially hundreds of schools would gather and compete for a championship. And this led to debate becoming a more overtly competitive activity. As things got more competitive, teams started developing tactics that were more geared toward beating opponents than persuading regular people. These strategies included things like talking at incredibly fast speeds to fit in more arguments, sometimes called spreading, making complicated arguments about the rules of debate, often called theory debating, and criticizing the opposition's actions or choice of language, sometimes called critical debating. These strategies were aimed at specialist judges, not regular people. And as they became more common, debate rounds started to become unrecognizable to outsiders, looking something like this. So, if you were a student who couldn't devote years to learning what was essentially a foreign language and learning how to speak it at about 300 words per minute, you were effectively excluded from participating. In the 1980s and 90s, schools began to try to address this problem by creating new forms of debate competition designed to limit these technical practices and return debate to its more public-focused, accessible roots. Some of these worked better than others, but none were truly successful. But by the late 1990s, a number of coaches and colleges hit on the idea of starting a league where the rules and the structure really required debaters to focus on methods of persuasion that were not super technical and could appeal to a wide array of regular people. And that league was the International Public Debate Association, or IPDA. Over the last nearly 25 years, the IPDA has been the fastest growing type of college debate in the country. It's become extremely popular here in the Deep South, but it's also taking root on the West Coast, the Pacific Northwest, the Midwest, and other places. And so when you think about what IPDA is, the key point is that it's a type of debate that's supposed to be accessible to everyone, not gated behind a bunch of technical terms and rules. An event that looks less like this and more like this.
Now, my next point is going to be that of the environment, and how ultimately we see that it's rockets, it's this gasoline, it's this oil that's used and invested in rocket technology and going to that space that's harming our ozone. People like to say, well, we're past the breaking point, we'll do it already. Well, if we keep this mentality, then yes, of course we'll go past the breaking point. But if this were true, why would President Obama make a $4 to $5 billion deal with Chinese President Xi Jinping to reduce global emissions?
Anyone who can stand up and make a compelling argument to their friends or their classmates should be able to have a great experience with IPDA. Certainly, it's challenging to win at the very top levels, but the challenge comes from being a well-rounded, logical, persuasive speaker, not from knowing a bunch of technical inside information. Now, a minute ago, I said the rules were designed to help encourage this well-rounded, persuasive debating. So how exactly did those rules work? That's a great question, so let's jump right in and learn the basic rules of IPDA. The most basic unit of a debate tournament is the debate round itself. The round is just what we call a single debate between two sides with one or more judges. The round has a set topic, and at the end of the round, the judge or the judges will pick a winner. Now, if you're worried about debating in front of a huge audience, don't be. Until you get into the final rounds of any given tournament, most rounds will take place in classrooms with just you, your opponent, and 1 to 3 judges. I say you and your opponent, but it's worth mentioning that there is also a division of IPDA for two-person teams called Team IPDA. In most tournaments, there are also divisions based on experience: novice, junior varsity, varsity, and pro. Novice is for people who have never debated before at any level. And this is great because it means if you're brand new, you won't get thrown in against way more experienced debaters. Junior varsity is typically for second-year debaters, varsity is for the most experienced debaters, and pro is a unique division where literally anyone can enter. Professors, grad students, debate coaches, even people who are totally unconnected to your school who just want to try debate. But whichever event or division you compete in, there are some things that are always the same. For each round you compete in, the tournament staff will assign you a side, either the affirmative, which tries to prove the topic true, or the negative, which tries to prove it false, or more precisely, tries to prevent the affirmative from proving it true. And that all raises the question, what exactly are we trying to prove true or false in this debate round? Well, the topic for a particular debate is called the resolution. And the resolution is just a positively worded statement that can be about almost anything. For example, the United States should adopt a carbon tax, or Batman could beat Black Panther in a fight. And don't laugh, that's an actual IPDA resolution. Or maybe Nick Saban is the GOAT, presumably standing for greatest of all time. Politics, pop culture, sports, history, science, quotes, you name it, it can be an IPDA topic. Now, another unique thing about IPDA is that in every single round, you actually get to help pick the resolution that you debate. See, unlike most forms of, for example, high school debate, in IPDA, every single round the topic changes. And I know that may sound a little intimidating at first, but it's actually a big part of what makes IPDA fun. About 30 minutes before each debate round, the tournament will hold what's called the draw. At the draw, you and your assigned opponent will meet up and be given a list of usually 5 possible topics. And the two of you will take turns striking the topics you don't want until there's just one left. The negative always goes first, then the affirmative, then the negative, then the affirmative, and you're left with one topic that you'll debate for the round. Now, after the striking is done, you'll both have about 30 minutes to prepare a case for your side. I say about because while 30 minutes is the norm, a few tournaments may shorten it a bit to 25 minutes or maybe even 20 minutes. And while you're preparing, you're free to consult with anything or anyone you want. Teams in IPDA typically help each other with preparation, which is part of what makes it fun. Even though you're actually debating on your own, preparation is often a team effort, especially if you have a teammate who's more knowledgeable about something like pop culture or sports. Okay, so now that we've taken care of the preliminary stuff, it's time to talk about the actual debate itself. Now, as with basically all forms of competitive debate, the IPDA debate round has set speaking times. In individual IPDA, they go like this: 5, 2, 6, 2, 3, 5, 3. Now let's talk about how each of these speeches works. The affirmative starts with a 5-minute constructive speech. Constructive just means the affirmative is constructing their case, or the reasons why the resolution should be affirmed. This is a fairly straightforward speech because at this point, there's nothing from the other side to refute yet, so the AF is just giving their side of the story. Now, in the affirmative constructive, and really in all speeches, debaters tend to try to be pretty organized. The affirmative will usually define any key terms in the resolution that might be ambiguous. They'll offer a weighing mechanism to suggest to the judge what they should be looking for in deciding the round. This might be something like the preponderance of the evidence, or which side makes the most logical sense. They'll also usually try to label their arguments clearly to help everyone keep track. So the major arguments will be called contentions, like my first contention is that a carbon tax will fight climate change. After this first speech, the affirmative is cross-examined for 2 minutes by the negative. So that means, yes, you will be asking questions directly to your opponent, which is a great way to try to show problems in their reasoning or just clarify their arguments. So if you love cross-examination scenes in courtroom dramas from TV, this is going to be your favorite part. Next, the negative side will have a 6-minute speech where they'll usually do 2 things. First, like the affirmative, they'll give their own case, in this instance for negating the resolution. And second, they'll provide an initial response or rebuttal to the points that the affirmative raised. Now, just as the cases themselves are usually organized into contentions, a good rebuttal is usually going to be pretty organized too, typically addressing each one of the opponent's main points in order, one by one. Next, as you might have expected, the negative will be cross-examined by the affirmative. And after that, the affirmative gets a 3-minute rebuttal speech, followed by a 5-minute negative rebuttal speech, and finally, a 3-minute closing speech by the affirmative. At the end of the round, the judge decides the winner and provides feedback on a written ballot. In some specific cases, the judge may tell you right then and there who won, but in most cases, at least in preliminary rounds, they don't. So, what are these judges looking for in choosing the winner? Well, there are as many answers to that question as there are people in the world. You see, unlike some other forms of debate, IPDA doesn't look for highly trained specialists with technical debate knowledge to judge. Instead, IPDA's judging pool can be drawn from all walks of life. You'll be judged by debate coaches and debaters, but also by people with no connection to debate, people from the community, really anyone who's willing to volunteer a few hours of their day to serve as a debate judge. This decision to use what's called layperson judging was a very deliberate choice. It was intended to keep IPDA from falling into the same trap as other forms of debate, where winning requires learning complex jargon and unspoken rules that serve to exclude outsiders. So, what does it take to win an IPDA round? Well, for my money, the best strategy is balance. You need to be a good speaker, but a polished speaking style alone isn't enough. You need to provide the judge with evidence, some sources to back up your claims, but strong evidence isn't worth much if you can't explain it in common sense terms. You need to address your opponent's specific arguments directly, but you also need to bring the judge back to the big picture of why your side is preferable. In other words, just like in real life, there's no single silver bullet when it comes to persuading IPDA judges. The goal is to make a strong, well-rounded argument, presented in an interesting and easy-to-follow manner. And the best way, really the only way to do that, is through practice. So, now that we know how one IPDA round works, how does the overall tournament operate? Well, tournaments normally take place on weekends on college campuses, although as we've learned during the COVID pandemic this year, online virtual tournaments are entirely viable and can actually be a lot of fun. So here's hoping that when we return to mainly in-person competition, IPDA keeps a couple of virtual events on the schedule. But no matter how the tournament is held, live or virtual, you'll have a set number of guaranteed preliminary rounds, sometimes 6, sometimes 5 or 7, but you'll debate all of these rounds whether you win or lose. That way, no matter what, you're getting plenty of experience debating and you're getting feedback on ballots from your judges. Once these preliminary rounds are done, you'll have what's called the break. At this point, competitors with the best records will advance to a single elimination tournament to determine the winner. How many debaters advance? Well, it depends on the size of the tournament and the schedule, but it's almost always fewer than half, and in many cases it's more like a third or even a quarter. The debaters who advance or break will be paired up in a bracket, just like March Madness or the NFL playoffs, and will debate in a single elimination format. Winner moves on, loser bows out, until one person remains as the champion. Typically, tournaments will have some kind of award or recognition for all the debaters who advance, not just the champion. So there's a decent shot at bringing home some hardware and recognition for your hard work. Also, there's an entirely separate type of award called speaker awards. See, in all those preliminary rounds, the judge isn't just assigning wins and losses, they're also giving each debater a score, usually on something like a 40-point scale. Once the preliminary rounds are done, the debaters with the top scores will usually receive speaker awards, recognizing them for excellent overall presentation, whether or not they were able to make it all the way to the late elimination rounds. Now, IPDA tournaments happen all over the country, sometimes as their own freestanding events and sometimes as part of larger speech and debate tournaments. Most of them will be listed on the IPDA website, and we'll post a link to that and other resources in the notes below. Every year in March or April, the IPDA season culminates with the national tournament and convention. There are season-long rankings for individuals and teams, and the league crowns overall season-long champions. But you don't have to worry about rankings, and you don't have to have any special connections. New teams and debaters show up all the time in IPDA and do very, very well. That's kind of the point. And so if you're thinking about giving IPDA a try, you definitely should. If your school already has a program, join it. If not, it's not hard to start a team. You and a couple of friends traveling to a couple of tournaments a semester is how many programs get started. If you can find a faculty member to serve as a sponsor, great. But you don't have to have a full-time coach. If you can get a little bit of funding from your college or university, that's great too. But IPDA isn't super expensive, and raising a few $100s for a hotel room, gas, and entry fees is very doable. Which raises the question, what exactly do I need to bring with me when I compete in an IPDA tournament? And the short answer is really not very much. In terms of dress, the expectations are really flexible. Some competitors wear full suits, but a simple dress shirt and khakis or skirt is more than enough. Some do the blazer and jeans combo, and you'll occasionally even see the blazer t-shirt combo. I wouldn't get too much more casual than that. For example, sweatshirts or t-shirts and shorts that you sometimes see in events like Policy Debate are probably a little too far. But when in doubt, a simple dress shirt and khakis or dress pants or a skirt is definitely the way to go. And you'll need something to do research on during your prep time. Because remember, when you're prepping for these resolutions, you can access any resource, so the internet is going to be a critically important resource. Usually this means you'll be using a laptop or an iPad. Your phone can do in a pinch or as a backup if, for example, the Wi-Fi goes out. But it's a lot easier if you're not having to squint at the screen or getting interrupted by texts and other notifications. You will also need some legal pads. One full pad per person is usually plenty, but go ahead and buy a pack to be sure you never run out. Because when you actually go into the debate round, the only thing you can bring with you is the notes that you put onto that pad along with a pen and a timer. Oh, and speaking of which, timers are important. You'll want to get a simple electronic timer for your speeches during the round. Now, you might think your phone will work fine, but the rules actually expressly forbid us to use phones or other internet-connected devices during the round, so a few cheap plastic timers for each debater are essential. What are some other things to throw into the debate box? Well, extension cords, because you never know where you'll have to set up and prepare. Snacks, because you can't think on an empty stomach. Water bottles, because hydration really helps keep you focused. And maybe a bottle of Tylenol or Advil, because not surprisingly, when you get to the 6th debate round of the day, the occasional headache is possible. But at the end of the day, the goal for IPDA has always been to expand the fun and the education of competitive debate to as many schools and as many people as possible. If you want to be the very best like no one ever was, well, there's certainly plenty of opportunity to do that. But there's also a great community of debaters, coaches, and judges who share a lot more in common than just showing up to win trophies. You can make lifelong friends in debate, learn about things you never thought you would, add great accomplishments to your resume, and just create memories and experiences from traveling and competing that you'll never forget. So that's IPDA debate in a nutshell. Hopefully, if you were interested before, you're more interested now. And with any luck, in the near future, we'll be able to start adding videos to this section of our channel to help people learn skills and strategies for getting better at IPDA. Until then, if you have questions, don't hesitate to drop them in the comments below or just reach out to us directly. Hopefully, we'll see you at some tournaments. So remember, as we always say on this channel, debate is for everybody, so work hard, have fun, and hail state.